hit the ground running with the most revolutionary personal training program ever developed. The National Academy of Sports Medicine, the #1 choice for fitness professionals, makes it quick, easy, and affordable to learn on the go. Be your own boss and start transforming lives from 9 to 99 with the all-new certified personal training program only at NASM.org.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Random Fit. My name is Wendy Batts, and I am here today with my colleague and friend, Mr. Ken Miller. Ken, how are you doing today?
I am well, Wendy. Thank you very much.
We're going to have another... you as well. We're going to have another unbelievable episode, and today's title is Fad or Rad, and we are really going to be talking a lot about unstable objects. And this is a topic that when we talk about balance training, some people think it's boring. Some people are like, oh yeah, I do balance training all the time. But I know once Ken and I started talking about it, we were like, you know what we see in the gym, and oftentimes the things that people don't think about while they're in the gym on some of these objects, we're hoping to kind of shed some light and get people thinking. So therefore, you hear all these statistics about the importance of balance training and how if you start training and working on balance at any age, how it's going to really carry over as you get older. Because if you see some of the crazy statistics of what happens when people fall and stuff and how it can actually be life-threatening, balance training should be a very important component of someone's regimen and stuff that they do every single day. So, Ken, I know you were excited to talk about this. So do you want to kind of kick us off a little and tell us, when we're talking about unstable objects, you want to talk us through what we're going to focus on today, but kind of in general, what we mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those topics that I think as a personal trainer, if you're listening to us here on Random Fit, and you're a personal trainer, you work out at a gym, or maybe you have your own garage gym or whatever environment you're in, you have some of these cool toys, right? These toys that sometimes have their own shelving somewhere in the corner of the gym, or maybe you have it just leaning against the wall. But usually these toys are objects that your clients might stand on, or they might be leaning, something that they might use to add some variety to their workout. So when we talk about these tools that are there, oftentimes in the context of balance training, it's a lot of times more than just that, right? So if you run group training, or if you run, let's say a post rehab, or maybe even performance, you're inclined to try to keep the workouts nice and spicy, like adding these toys. You can take a regular exercise that you might do 80% of the time, but you add a unstable platform underneath your client, and now that gives you a whole different dynamic. So balance training is part of it. You need to know how to react to the environment underneath you, and oftentimes you want to create these unstable surfaces or platforms for your clients to stand on, so that we can actually learn how to make these what they call micro adjustments to the surface, so that when you in real life come across something that's unstable, like when you're transitioning from, let's say, a walkway to sand or walkway to grass, and now it's not this predictable, flat, solid environment, your body has to know how to respond. And if we don't provide these novel and new, or just these surfaces that we have little to almost no interactions on a regular basis, this gives us an opportunity to create something that your clients will have to respond to, but at the same time, feed into that need of creating a varied workout program, especially for clients that you've had for an extended period of time. So these unstable objects, again, are just things that you can really have a lot of fun with. But on the other end, if we're not responsible, and if we don't do what if we're not considerate of proper progressions and making these transitions to where the client can control themselves, we can be doing a bigger disservice than anything else when it comes to their training sessions.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the key points we want to point out is, when you're doing things at the gym and you're using a big stability ball, and you're doing, let's say, a chest press, or you're face down and doing a row, like that is an unstable object for sure. So, but that isn't really what we're discussing today. So I just want to make it clear that there are a ton of things out there where you can make your base of support unstable, which will challenge your core. It will recruit more muscles, as well as the prime mover, or the muscle that you're focusing on, like if you're doing a chest press. But when we're talking about unstable objects today, what we really want to focus on is mainly what's happening at, like, we're on 1 foot or 2 feet. So we're really just talking about the foot and ankle complex and things that you're standing on. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there because, there is a huge benefit when you're doing stabilization training and everything. But when we're talking about balance, just wanted to make sure that we emphasize that we're standing on something. And that's what we're going to spend some time discussing today. And, to your point, Ken, when you were talking about balance training, and actually, standing on unstable objects, so many people go to the gym, or even if they're at home and they're, standing on 1 foot and they're trying to keep their balance. However, their arms are out and they're trying, they're moving in all different directions, and they're just trying everything in their power to stay on that 1 foot. But their positioning is just all over the place. That actually is not beneficial. And, as a trainer, I think it's very important that we constantly teach good information and execution with movement patterns. So therefore, as you were talking about, when you're bringing it into everyday life, it's going to carry over. So you kind of get what you train for. And, there's a quote that's, I love the Karate Kid. Again, I know I'm aging myself, but Mr. Miyagi, he's like, balance good, everything good. Balance bad, better pack up and go home. And that's pretty much how it is. And so, so there are proper, progressions that I think is important to note, because even just standing on the floor, that is balance training, especially if you're going to stand on it single leg. And, when you go from the floor to something like a balance beam, that beam itself is on a stable ground, and the beam itself is hard and doesn't, it's just made out of wood. And so that would be a progression, and it's a micro progression because, now you're on a smaller base of support. However, it's still very stable, and you can stand on it with your whole foot supported. You turn it to where you're standing on the ball of the foot, but that would be the next progression from the floor. And then you want to kind of think past that. And I know, I could talk about this forever, but I mean, when we're going past that and you're starting to think, okay, well, what would be next? There are the balance boards, and I think the balance board is very underutilized, but it's and especially on a rehab side. I worked in a physical therapy clinic for years, and when people would come out of a foot and ankle surgery, once they were able to start adding some mobility to that specific joint, they would be in a seated position with their foot on a board. And I know we're going to talk about kind of the differences, but I mean, just trying to get mobility, with their foot on that one piece of equipment without even standing, was a lot. And so, the big thing, and I think the one, I'm not even talking about key takeaways because we're not even 10 minutes in, but it's very, very important to think about what's happening. And you can step in here in a second, but what's happening in the foot and ankle complex. And so when we say, are you able to truly balance on that piece of equipment? What do we mean by that?
Well, using equipment is like you're saying, it is the next progression, because just for some people, just standing on solid ground on the floor, shoes off, because a lot of people don't realize that if I am working with a client with shoes on, the shoes can actually add quite a bit of support and actually be deceiving as far as how stable you feel on solid earth. But once you take the shoes off, now you're left to your own devices when it comes to how your foot interacts with the ground. So that's, as you're mentioning, is just one progression. And then as you start to use these different implements, whether it be the balance beam, airex pad, Bosu ball, Core-Tex, whatever it is about control. It is about having, not like control over your dog or your kids, but it's about being able to manipulate and have, the command of where your foot is, where your knee is, where your hips are from a reflexive standpoint. So if I have to think about my foot pronating or over pronating or being pronated for too long of a time frame, that takes too long, and that's more of a conscious effort. But what we are talking about when it comes to balance and balance control, it's reflexively. Does your body from a nervous system standpoint, can it make these dynamic changes quickly, instantaneously, within milliseconds? So as we're here, both Wendy Batts and me, Ken Miller, here on Random Fit, talking about unstable surfaces, FAD or RAD. This is what we're talking about. It's about control with an unstable surface, under you. So in summary, Wendy, it is about control and making these adjustments within milliseconds and not having to think about making these changes, because again, like we say in our workshops, life happens fast, right? And you have to be able to react faster. So training and using these implements, that's what's going to help you be in the safest position possible, just interacting with the environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it comes back to, you get what you train for. I mean, we say that often, but I mean, as a trainer, that's why we keep saying you want to program good information in, because, if you're, when we're talking about these unstable objects, and we're going to go through like what Ken and I think are really good progressions to help someone. So if you don't have a trainer and you're at the gym the next day, there are so many cool toys that are out there at the gym that just because they're there doesn't mean you should use them, because there is a progression. And if you're standing on something, whether it's on 2 feet or even if you're trying to do it single leg, and with what Ken had just said, if you're standing on it and all of a sudden like your foot's rocking forward and back and side to side and there's no control, then you're teaching your ankle no control. And so when you go to step off of a curb, and instead of it, and it kind of takes you by surprise because it wasn't what you thought when you stepped down, like maybe you stepped on a rock or your foot went into a different position. If you train in an unstable way and you really don't get those muscles to fire right, then you could end up with ankle sprains or strains or tear something. I mean, break an ankle because you would fall. And so some things like that, is one reason we wanted to bring it to the forefront. But, if you're thinking about being in the gym and you want to try some of this stuff, look down at your positioning. And then you're going to have to ask yourself, there's something called controlled instability, which is what you want. You want it to be an uncontrolled environment, but you want to have stability in your joints and your muscles actually firing the way that they were intended to fire. What you don't want is uncontrolled instability, because that is teaching bad patterns. And, one thing I see often, unfortunately, at the gym is there is a incredible device called like a Bosu ball. People have seen it. If you haven't, it's basically think of a whole ball. It's cut in half, and the bottom of it is a hard surface and the top of it is a dome. And, and it can be blown up really heavy, and then it can also have less air in it. So it's very, very squishy. And the more squishy it is, the more, it'll be harder to balance on, because you're going to be more unstable. But, I see people all the time in the gym and they're standing on it with both feet and they're rocking back and forth and side to side, and they're trying to do their bicep curls. And they're like, look at me, I'm standing on this cool thing. But I'm like, but what are you achieving? And so that one's a hard one to gut, but I see it all the time.
Yeah. And that's an easy one to pick on, because, since the Bosu's been out since 2000, that's a long time for a piece of equipment that, to be out there, and to see that basically in a lot of the gyms that I've worked out in, they'll have one of those. So it gets the exposure definitely to the general population just working out, or even by personal trainers, which makes it also, there's a high opportunity for it to be used incorrectly. So when it comes to that piece of equipment, great piece of equipment if it's used properly. So if somebody's on there, they're on the flat side up. Again, a lot of people don't realize that Bosu means both sides up, or both sides used. Either way, you have that option of standing on the flat side or that domed airfield side. But if someone, like you're mentioning, when if somebody's on that flat side and they're rocking back and forth and they're doing something even as easy as a, quote unquote easy as a bicep curl, right? But if someone's legs and hips are all over the place, that Bosu is just kind of moving, and and because you are standing on an upside down dome, you can rock forward, backward, diagonal, and all these planes of motion. But for the most part, if someone can't control that platform, then really they have no business on it. So because they are teaching instability from that point. Plus, something that you and I have talked about with in workshops and things like this, it is about risk versus benefit, to where is this worth the risk for the the quote unquote benefit that the trainer thinks that they're getting by using a good piece of equipment incorrectly.
Yeah, I think you make some valid points. And, for those of you guys that are listening, this is Wendy Batts. Ken Miller is on the other side of this, and we're talking about unstable objects, and really just want to talk about that there is a progression. And when we're talking about 3 planes of motion, what we mean by that is either when you think about when you walk forward and backwards, that's more what they call the sagittal plane. When you go side to side, that's the frontal plane. And anytime you start moving side or rotation and move from one side to the other, where your body is rotating in space, then that is more of the transverse plane. And that's actually where more injuries occur, is in that specific plane. And so you want to really train and be very, very careful with that. And, I think there's so many unstable objects, and there's so many different tools out there. We obviously couldn't name them all. But, when we're talking about a progression, you want to think about this. If you can start on the floor and you can balance standing on 2 feet, you can maintain your abs in, you can maintain your shoulders back and your chin's back, and you're awesome in alignment, then just try to stand on 1 foot, go single leg. But if you notice that your arches keep, falling in, and you go from having a good foot to a flat foot, your knee's going to cave in, you may shift or lose your balance, then just stay there. Just stay there, and then have that other foot there kind of hovered beside it, kind of touch down on the floor when you need to, and then get good at just that. And then if you own that and you excel in that, then go to the balance beam. A lot of places don't have a balance beam. A lot of rehab places do. But if you don't have that, then they have a half foam roller. So it's a piece that, people are getting more and more accustomed to the foam roller that you do, obviously rolling on to loosen yourself up, warm yourself up, and then also utilize again in the cool down. But it's the one that's kind of cut in half, and you can either stand on it where it rocks side to side, or you can put dome down. And, you don't always have to go to the most challenging thing first. Execute it, do it well, but you're only working at that time 1 plane of motion. So then you're worried about more side to side. So you're not doing the forward and back, you're not rotating, you're not doing anything like that, but you're challenging yourself in that frontal plane, so the side to side, while you're doing something else. Or maybe you're just focusing only on that. And then from my perspective, and Ken, I'll let you kind of talk about more of the airfield, but I would go floor, beam, half foam roll, and then I would go to something like the airex pad. And the airex pad, for those of you guys that don't know what it is, it's basically like a pillow. And, it's been around since, I think I read 1952. It's made out of closed cell foam that was made from PVC pipes. And so there's different types that are out there now. There's some that are very firm, and then there's more that are squishy. And so not all airex pads are made the same. So again, depending on that, when you're standing on this pillow, then you have to be able to control yourself. Like you said, rocking forward and back, rocking side to side. And then as you're trying to maintain, making sure that your ankle isn't rolling in a circle. And what that does is that trains those little muscles in your feet to hold good arch alignment. So no matter what kind of surface you're walking on, you're going to reduce the chance of knee pain, hip pain, that's going to lead to low back pain, because, there's something called the kinetic chain, which just means your body. So we always try to make it sound savvy. It just means your whole body. We're trying to make sure that we're training from the foot all the way up in the ideal form, just to reduce injury. And so, from the airex pad, Ken, you want to take us from there? Because I really believe that the air-filled ones is where people get in trouble.
Yeah, and we already brought one up with the Bosu, and the Bosu is a really easy one to bring up because, like I said earlier, it's been out there for over 20 years now, and it's in pretty much a lot of well, I'd say most health clubs and gyms that you'll see out there, but it's also got pretty big exposure to rehab or post rehab facilities. So you have that, and a lot of times it can be used in two different ways. One, as I mentioned earlier, it's like the hard circular flat surface on one side, and then the air-filled dome on the other. Because it has basically two uses, it's you've got a lot of flexibility as far as how that's used. So that's one of the air-filled options. And then the other one is the Dynadisc, which can be very, very tricky because, depending on how much air or how much air pressure you have inside and how much it's been filled up, you either have a really firm, round disc that's been filled with air. So maybe a few inches, thick, and I forget what the diameter is, but, if it's a little underinflated or less inflated, then that leaves a lot of room for your foot to react. Basically, it's allowing whatever motion your foot is doing to be exaggerated if you don't have that proximal or that good hip control over the knee, which now trickles down to the foot. So it's not just a demand that's coming from the foot on up, but it also is about having the control more towards the core and working its way down. So definitely a challenging piece of equipment if you're using that as from a single leg balance standpoint, which for a lot of people I don't recommend because it is so dynamic from that vantage point. So with those two basic ones, with the Dynadisc, as we mentioned, as well as the Bosu, there's other players in the market when it comes to these air-filled platforms like the Terra Core, which has been around for a few years now, but for the most part, you have a hard flat surface. It's like an elongated Bosu. So from that vantage point, you have almost the same challenges, but you have a different set of, I guess, factors and challenges within those two. But when it comes to the air-filled ones, air pressure is going to play a role in how stable or unstable it is, but it also just gives you, another way of challenging from a very, very dynamic standpoint.
Absolutely. And I know there's another one that we're going to actually talk about. It's called the Core-Tex, and you actually have one. And I find this one fascinating because I don't. I seem like I have everything else, as we were talking about. What do I have in my home gym? This is not one thing, but I know you actually have it at your facility. So do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's unbelievable, but if you aren't dialed in, it is definitely not the piece of equipment for you.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Wendy, when we're talking about pieces of equipment, and we talked about progressing from one piece and migrating up to the next, as far as the challenge goes. So like what we mentioned with the half foam roller, that's only going to pivot depending on how your foot is placed on there. Either it's going to rock forward and back or in the sagittal plane, or if your foot is placed lengthwise, it's going to rock left or right, or more on the frontal plane movement. So from that vantage point, again, we can now work up to the airex pad, to the Dynadisc, Bosu, Terra Core. So the challenges, or the challenge created by the piece of equipment, you can look at those as being progressed, and we can look at those as being categorized differently, like you said, firm to air filled, and little foam in there with the airex pad. But when we were talking about the Core-Tex, this is one of those that's been a game changer. I think its first application was more to not so much the performance side, but those that are looking to gain proprioception and mobility. But what we really want to look at is that you're playing a game of pitch and catch. And by that, I mean, it's about reaction. So as you stand on this flat surface, now upside down on the other side is a reverse dome, if you can picture it. But under that dome, under that hard plastic dome, are these, what they call these ball transfers, but basically look at it like ball bearings. And that's what allows the Core-Tex to move forward, backward, side to side rotation and all of those at the same time. So Anthony Carey, who's the creator of the Core-Tex out of San Diego, a longtime friend of the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and full disclosure, a longtime friend of mine. So just so you know, with the Core-Tex, it is one of those that you stand on that platform, and like I said, it's a game of pitch and catch, to where if my right foot comes down, my left foot has to react. And then as my left foot reacts, both frontal, sagittal, and transverse plane, now my right foot has to react. So it's a constant game of pitch and catch. So it's not so much, we can't look at it like a tool, like we're trying to maintain balance or a certain position. What we are looking forward to is looking at to how we react, which is kind of like the theme that we're looking at with the other pieces of equipment that we're talking about. How do we interact with the ground? But this one offers not just, to say it's a balance exercise or a balance tool would be a misnomer, but more along the lines of we were creating a greater ability to react in all planes of motion at the same time. And when I say that, you're also adding all those planes of motion simultaneously along with a rotational component. So, a few years ago, I had a chance to go to spring training out in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And for one professional team, I spoke on that piece of equipment to the sports medicine department. So the athletic trainers, the head athletic trainer, and a couple of the physical therapists. But then with another major league team, I spoke to the strength conditioning staff about that same piece of equipment and how they can use it from that vantage point to enhance their players' ability to move, as well as, like what we're talking about, react. And I will say that within those two respective departments, one being the sports medicine team and one being performance, they all had the BOSU, they had the airex pad, they had the Dynamo, they had all those cool toys. And this was just another piece that, depending on what you're trying to achieve with their baseball players, would be integrated in some way, shape, or form. So it is definitely should be one of the tools in your arsenal when it comes to challenging proprioception and reaction, which is what we're really trying to do with these tools that we just mentioned.
And I think it's very important to think too, like, as you mentioned, I mean, again, I've worked in professional sports, and balance is key in so many sports. And, if you're never really training for balance and you're never really training on unstable surfaces that you can, again, control, very important. You have to be able to control what you're standing on. Then, injuries can occur like that. I mean, it's so fast, and people are like, right. I just lost my footing. I don't know how that happened. And of course, when we hear that, we automatically assume, well, they must be older. But this is happening at younger ages now too, because, we've got to think there are more people, and unfortunately more youth, maybe not out playing as frequently as they are. However, now it's becoming, baseball season or t-ball season for me. And, I want to get my little kid out there running around. And if he hasn't done anything, active in a while, and then I have him go run, when he hits first base, there's that little lift, there's a lot of bad things that can happen. And so, the good thing about balance training is, even when you're at home, try standing on one leg while you're brushing your teeth. Can you do that? Are you successful at it? But if you want to use some of the cool toys or tools, I should say, or modalities, if we're going to go that route, but you want to use some of those at the gym. I think it's just very important to think about what is the progressions that we talked about. But if there's you're just really dying to use this BOSU ball because it's cool. Ken, you mentioned this earlier today when we were just talking offline, and I think it's fantastic that you don't have to stand on it on one foot. Try standing on the Dynadisc. Try standing on two Dynadiscs, not one with both feet, but two different Dynadiscs, 1 foot on each one. Try to maintain proper alignment and see what's happening at the foot and ankle. If you want to, play with the BOSU ball, but that you can't stand on it without kind of feeling really unstable, then like you had mentioned, do a lunge and put the back foot on that BOSU ball or something, piece of equipment that you want to use. But your front foot, that's the one that's loaded more, is on a firm, solid, on the ground, to make sure that your knee isn't wobbling everywhere. Because, if you're going down and you have your foot on something that's very unstable, then you're actually, if your arches are caving in, your knee's going to go in. It's not really going to get proper activation of, at that point, if you're doing a lunge or a squat, of the glute and the quad, which should be it would actually be causing yourself to go into compensation, which is going to lead to bad motor recruitment long term. And so it's more of just a safety thing. And those are you guys that are joining us. We're talking about unstable objects. Is it a fad or is it rad? We're hoping that you guys think it's a rad thing. It really needs to be implemented into your programming. It needs to be a priority, and vary it up. Don't always use the same piece of equipment. Have fun in your workouts for sure. Just make sure that when you're doing something that it makes sense. And, you don't be that guy or that girl at the gym that's like, hey, just because I can stand on something, I'm going to do it. Make sure if you stand on something, you own it. So that way you look good when you're doing it. It's all about how you look, right? At the end of the day, you gotta look good. So,
And the thing about it is that bad information usually propagates bad information. And the gym floor is no different because I mean, and as well as I do, Wendy, you see that one person that's got the arms and the shoulders and all that stuff that you want in yourself, and you see what they're doing, and they're like, okay, I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to use that piece of equipment. I'm going to do it just like that person did, so I can get those biceps and those shoulders, because obviously that's what got that person to look that way to begin with.
Had nothing to do with genetics, by the way.
Had nothing to do with nutrition, preparation, genetics, planning, all that. Had nothing to do with all that. Just had to do with that one piece of equipment that they look really good at. And balance equipment is, these traditional, quote unquote, balance equipment are no different. You see that one person that's doing these circus acts on there and it looks cool. It's that cool, sexy exercise that, that somebody did with their personal trainer. And that can lead us down the wrong path. You can wind up getting hurt or basically doing yourself a disservice and training yourself for something you think you're getting, but actually doing the opposite. So like what you said, Wendy, there is a progression, just like the intensity of the exercise or the demand of the piece of equipment. So you can also change and progressively challenge how you set yourself up. So like you said, and I love what you said, if you're doing a split squat, put it under your back foot and then you'll work your way up to the forward foot. Or if you wanted to have your loaded leg, then just don't go down as far, right? Maybe make it a quarter squat or quarter lunge or a half lunge, and then work your way to a full lunge. So when we talk about these tools, it is about progressing and responsibly integrating it into a comprehensive program.
Yes. All the above. Yes. Yeah. And you know what? And if you're thinking to yourself, I wonder when I'm balancing if I am, keeping myself in ideal form. If you can imagine a bird that goes into the water and it starts cleaning themselves and then it gets all their feathers wet and they're like flapping their arms just to try to dry off before they take off. If you're that person that's flapping their arms, standing on something, or, has zero control on the implement that you're on, that's too advanced. Look at it that way. Just take something that's a little less advanced. Start out easy. I know it's hard for us as trainers. It's hard for us that are the weekend warriors that love to go to the gym and they're like, I can do anything. But good information in, good information out, as we talked about. Realize that there's so many unbelievable tools. Have fun with them. Just make sure that it makes sense. And, and like Mr. Miyagi says, balance good, everything good. Balance bad, pack up and go home. And that is the truth. I will say that till the day I die, because, it's super important. But before we wrap up, Ken, do you have any key takeaways, any last minute words of wisdom?
Well, I think we've said it all. And to sum it up, I'd just say, be responsible with the equipment that you pick. There is a progression in demand. Progress how you get somebody to use a piece of equipment, controlling the load, the range, the depth of how you use these pieces. But, like what we just said, incorporating to a bigger picture, have purpose behind what you're using, and know how to, use it on yourself first, know how to explain it, know the purpose and how it fits into the big picture for your client. Otherwise, it is just a circus act.
Yes. Don't be that clown.
Don't be that clown. You know, and I was just thinking with your bringing up the example of a bird flapping. I was wondering when the Audubon Society was going to make their introduction into the random fit. That just shows you how random this.
You just never know what's going to come out. But hopefully we have provided some good insight on the importance of balance training. And, we just want to say thank you guys so much for being a part of our show. We hope you enjoyed the content that we covered. If you like what we talk about and you want to hear more about just random stuff in the fitness industry, please like, subscribe, download, be a part of our Random Fit family, because we have more unbelievable great things to come. Anywhere where you listen to podcasts, that's where you can find us. And we are looking forward to seeing you next time. And until then, be well.